Welcome to SFH Presents One More Podcast.
Welcome to SFH Presents One More Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Polk. Going solo today, no Ty Southern. But I do have with me Robert Schwenk Jr. I looked into your story a little bit, interested for this story, for a lot of your story, actually. There were a couple of paragraphs of it that I read. But just start out the way that we do every podcast. Well, not medical professionals. Seek help if you need help through real people. What does still fucking here mean to you?
Simply one word: resilience. I mean, we all face various traumas in life, and just being able to figure out a way to work through those, and finding that resilience to just keep going, because sometimes it's really fucking hard.
That's a fact. Sitting through now, we're getting close to 50 episodes in the books, and man, to say it's kind of a the show's loosely about survivors, but truthfully, everyone is a survivor on some level. But and Ty being a triple amputee, often people are like, what I'm going through is nothing compared to what you went through, but it is not a competition. That being said, you've had some shit on your plate, man. Where do we even begin?
It's hard to figure out where to begin, because the way I'm very vulnerable about my trauma. My life has been nothing but trauma. Physical scars from trauma from before I can even remember to the first, actually the second memory that I have started trauma as well. I was physically, mentally, and sexually abused and essentially abandoned by my mother by the time I was 8 years old.
Fuck.
And then turned to drugs and alcohol at 11 years old. And that doesn't include, the alcohol. I was thinking about it the other day because I just hit a year without drinking. And I was thinking about it the other day. That doesn't include the alcohol that was given to me as a child for coughs or, teething and everything else that, I heard about. So quite likely the longest period in my entire life that I have not had alcohol.
Damn.
Yeah. So it's a lot, but the most recent thing was in October 2023. My son was murdered in his barracks room in Camp Lejeune. So that's been a hard one to process and work through.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah, last night we went out to a Disturbed concert in Pittsburgh, the 25th anniversary tour of The Sickness, and it was a great show, but it was highly emotional for me because that was the first concert I ever took Austin to, was a Disturbed concert.
Fuck.
And it was all the trauma has given me memory issues. There's not a lot of good that I remember in my life because the trauma, even with the years I've put into my mental health, the trauma still outweighs all the other memories because, because it just takes up so much of your life.
Yeah.
So it was pretty awesome and emotional to sit there through the concert and just get these full on physical and visual memories of the concert I went to with Austin. So that was it was awesome to just feel him there with me and be able to see him rocking out again.
That's a beautiful thing, man. I connect. I've been a musician for 30 years, and my dad was. I connected with him through music. I connect with my kids through music. I can relate to that so much, man. I think the idea of any trauma possible in this world, losing a kid, ranks number one for me. I can't imagine anything being worse.
Yeah, it's up there. It definitely is. It makes life difficult. You know, there's a whole another piece of you that's been ripped away. You know, I still say I was in Fallujah 20 years ago, and he was uh, just about, you know, 1 years old then, and uh, uh, I left a piece of me over there. Yeah, so it's, you know, left a piece of me over there, and that's, you know, when he was 1 years old, and then like this is like a whole different, just giant chunk of me just ripped away.
Yeah.
Um, you know, it's not just feeling for me; it's feeling for my older son and my daughter, who's, you know, she's still little, and that was you know, that was her big brother, you know, at
Yeah.
19 years old, he'd be chasing his 7-year-old sister around the house and playing
Right.
like he was the same age with her. And you know, it's hard to know that she's not growing up with that kind of connection anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I can, again, I can relate a little. I mean, not from the parental side, but my sister, the closest in age to me, because I have four total. There's me and two sisters and one brother, and my oldest sister, who's younger than me, died in a car accident when I was like 24, I guess. She was 20, and I watched how that broke my mom, you know, and she's never been the same, really. And I understand. I have kids of my own, and I can't fathom that. Um, just to I mean, if you're okay telling the story, what how'd that all go down?
Um, so from my understanding, I've got the redacted versions of all the information now, and I haven't combed through it because it's hard. Um, but the overall everything is that uh, this Marine, Bop, came back from a hunting trip over the weekend and forgot to drop his weapon off at his civilian friend's house off base. Um, and he was drinking in another barracks room with a couple other Marines who started talking about handguns, and somebody was talking about they wanted to buy one for their mom or something, and, you know, getting some ideas. And he apparently was like, oh, I got something you guys should check out. Ran out to his POV and came back in with the gun. Um, Unloaded it, loaded it, cleared it, was apparently just popping around, playing with it. And,
Yeah.
you know, and this is an armory Marine on top of, you know, just being a Marine. We all know weapon safety rules. They're drilled into us. And as an armory Marine, there's documented that he's signed additional training for weapon safety. Um, and apparently got cleared, passed around a few times, and then he loaded. There was a witness who said he loaded the gun, and a witness who said he heard him say he's been itching to kill someone. Um, and he's only a couple months out from his EAS. So he apparently went up to my son's room uh, to talk to my son's roommate about borrowing the air fryer, or my son's roommate was borrowing his air. Somebody was borrowing an air fryer, and there was a trade of alcohol for the use of the air fryer. So he goes up to my son's room with the gun, and apparently was joking around with my son's roommate and pointed the gun at himself, then pointed the gun at my son's head, uh, and pulled the trigger.
Fuck.
So my son was just sitting there playing on his video games, minding his own business. Um,
God, that
they,
is. So heavy.
Oh yeah, and then there's conflicting statement between the witness and the forensic evidence. The witness stated he was a foot away from my son when the gun was discharged. The forensic pathologist stated that no, the the marks that were left indicate that the gun was pressed right up against his temple.
So, did you hear any kind of explanation from the kid that did the shooting? What was his explanation for what happened? He didn't know it was loaded, and he was just fucking around. Like, what did he try to say?
He just apologized. There was no admission that he did take the plea deal, but from what I can remember, because it was highly stressed situation, I don't remember him ever like acknowledging that he like what he did. It was
Damn.
just apologies.
And what was the resulting like what was his punishment? What happened to him as a result?
So 1 year for bringing the weapon on base, and 7 years for involuntary manslaughter is what the plea deal.
So
And
he got
that's
8 years. Was it?
yes, and that's where my big issue is because apparently a new regulation or order came down that there's a new special trial counsel in DC that is supposed to handle these type of cases, murders, involuntary manslaughters, rapes, any kind of like high profile cases. They're no longer supposed to be handled by a base. Um, so the incident happened in October. That rule went into effect in December, but he wasn't officially charged until January. However, it was still kept on base, and
Mm.
despite our objections, the commanding general of the 2nd Marine Division was the one who signed off on the plea deal. So we didn't want the plea deal, his mother and I. Um, the prosecution didn't want the plea deal. They were ready to go to trial for the murder charge. And he still presented it, to a degree, presented it at the sentencing hearing as, murder. Uh, and that's still how I view it as. I mean, you gotta,
It's 100% murder.
right.
Fuck, dude. How did they ever give any explanation for why such a short sentence for something so heinous?
That is common. They literally showed a list of cases of similar incidents of service members getting murdered, essentially, and plea deals being taken with the average sentence between 4 and 8 years.
That's fucking wild. That
Yeah.
makes no sense. Is it? I mean, I don't understand their logic there. If somebody's a murderer, someone's a murderer. Is it because it's one of their own that they don't think they should be punished for killing one of their own?
So one of the things that was told to me is that they still take a lot of weight in a dishonorable discharge because they can't get their benefits, they can't get this and that. But right, exactly.
They're alive and they have freedom. What the fuck?
Right.
That's crazy. I would be livid. I'm sure that you've. I mean, on top of the loss of your son, having to deal with all those emotions of that being handled that way is just it's mind boggling, man. I can't fathom. I just can't fathom what their explanation would be. You know what I mean? Like that if that's it that they lose that they're dishonorably discharged, that's beyond ridiculous, man.
It's a failure in leadership. I mean, especially with this situation, so when the incident happened, there was one CG who absolutely refused to sign off on the plea deals. And then there was a change of command, and then the new CG that came in signed off on the plea deal, likely just to get it off his desk.
There's so many different situations where I feel like, especially with the military, where people are just dehumanized, where it's not a human being with a family, it's just a number, a name, etc. That's horrific, man. I'm sorry that you and your family have had to go through that. That's horrific. I can't. I've just, even my sister, who was nothing like losing a child. How that all went down with us was like the emotional side of dealing with something where you felt like someone's at fault, and to have them not. I'm speechless, man. That's heartbreaking.
It is, and then I have that military, that violent side of me that's like, well, I'm waiting for the day, and then I have this other side of me. Well, I can't do that. I still have a little girl who needs me, um,
Right.
and all the other things I'm doing out there to help our brothers and sisters that you know they need me. So it's a hard weight to carry. Because it's not right at all, but I don't know what else I can really do about it, without
Yeah.
without essentially ending my own life, through committing acts that don't need to be, that I shouldn't be committing.
Yeah. While it may serve justice in one way, it serves injustice to your daughter. It serves injustice to the people who love you and the other people that you're involved with. I totally get it, man. It's why you count on the justice system, to take care of those things for you and do the right thing. And when it doesn't, what the fuck, man?
Right.
That's terrible. I'm glad that you had that connection with him through music. Um, like I said, me and my daughter, like I can remember going to one of the first concerts I took her to, where I felt that moment where I literally just cried watching her love it, was Deftones. We're both metal kids too. I actually toured with Disturbed in 2000 for the whole Ozfest. Um, but I'm glad you got to feel that, man. Uh, I'm glad you guys shared in something that came back to you like that. That's special.
Yeah. Yeah, it was October of 2019 when we got to see him.
Damn.
And then we got to see a couple more shows together over the next couple years before he enlisted.
Mm. So you were a Marine as well.
Correct.
Okay, so it's in the blood. He was clearly destined to be that, probably.
He was born there on Camp Lejeune, and that's all he wanted to do his entire life. Um, when I was in my darkest place, I tried to convince him not to join the Marine Corps. Because I didn't want him to go through all that mental shit that I've had to go through, and that
Yeah.
his, not blood, but his uncles went through. And so I fought with him for a little bit, and it crushed him. But he also sat with me and saw some of my healing, and asked advice and worked on some of his own healing. And as I healed, it was more like, well, this isn't my choice to make.
Yeah.
It's his. Um,
Well, and in seeing you heal through some of that, if he were to, if what happened didn't happen and he were to end up in the same spot, then he would have hope that he could get through that. With some of the things I go through mentally, my kids have had to deal with a lot. And I think about that all the time. I think about it's important for me to win and important for me to grow, so for them to see it's possible. Damn. Um, so going back to your early life, you said you had went through abuse. Uh, Sounds pretty severe. And your mom abandoned you. Did you say it by 8?
Yes. So uh, not like drop me off like at a fire station or anything, but to me, I see it as abandonment, and I've always felt it as abandonment. I From my earliest memory, my very first memory was seeing my dad's hand or a hand reach over me and knock on a door to a house, open the door, and I run in and I hug my great grandma. And for the next few years, I lived with my great grandma, and she was in her 80s, taking care of a young child. I wasn't exactly the quietest kid. I'm 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. I'm rambunctious and running around.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I was around 7 years old when she just got to the point where she couldn't handle it anymore. So my mom, I was supposed to go live with her for a school year and see how that worked out. So she picked me up, drove me 45 minutes out to her house, and very vividly remember sitting there in her station wagon I had this white like soccer blanket and sitting on my lap, and she said, "Hold on a minute, I'll be right back." And it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. She came back out and she's like, "I'm sorry, we don't have any room for you here."
What?
Yeah. So she tried to take me back to my great grandma's. My great grandma, like, understandably, the reason he couldn't take care of me anymore is because she was old. Um, and so she wouldn't take me back at that point. So that's when I got dropped off at my aunt's house, and at my aunt's house is where sexual abuse occurred. So I felt abandoned by my mom, and then hurt that I ended up getting put in this place where all this other abuse occurred.
I can't even imagine how terrifying as a kid all of that had to be.
I mean, as a kid, it was just dysfunction. I mean, some of it is terrifying. It's emotionally damaging, absolutely. Um, but as a child who didn't know and didn't understand it, it almost felt normal.
Mm.
Um, until the day, I ended up in emotionally disturbed classes, throwing desks at teachers, and doing all kinds of shit, getting in trouble. And they're finally, my dad decided to move out of Virginia and up to Ohio, and I was 9 years old when everybody's like, "Well, you're going to live with your dad." Um, so I got sent up here, and then a couple years later, one of my cousins who was also abused came forward about it. And I was in middle school at the time, and they wanted to ask me about it because I was there, I was part of it, I was witnessed it, and what have you. And they put me in an office, and there had to be like 8 people in there between the principal, a counselor, uh, cops, and I don't even know who all else, but it was like so overwhelming and so like had me so scared. I said, "No, I have no idea what she's talking about." I couldn't admit it. I didn't admit any of this stuff until I was 30 years old.
Wow. I could understand. I mean, I can understand that, you know?
Yeah.
I think
So,
that's fairly normal. If I mean, I never went through anything like that, but it seems like it's pretty damn heavy and hard to deal with and hard to work through for someone.
well, yeah, I never had any my great grandma, like, I loved her, she was always there, but she was also old school where, kids are meant to be seen, not heard. So I would be playing off quietly or have my headphones on while doing a puzzle or coloring or what have you. It wasn't a lot of interaction. It wasn't a
Right.
proper household where I was taught feelings and how to process through things. Um, and then when I went to go live with my dad, that was, a whole nother debacle. He was in his early 30s at the time, and he was focused on himself, dating other women, and I remember a time where he took his girlfriend and his girlfriend's kid to the circus while I sat at home by myself. Um,
Fuck.
and then he moved us in with a different girlfriend, and her son started bullying me. Like to the point where the only concussion I've ever had in my life was from this kid throwing a rock at me and hitting me directly in the temple. Forced to eat dog shit. Like all kinds of madness. So to get away from all that, I found the friends that use drugs and alcohol starting at 11 years old, on my own terms.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't just a like, oh, I'm just going to take a little drink. As soon as I realized what it did, I was like, oh, yeah, stealing bottles and, drinking whole bottles of whiskey at 11, 12, 13 years old. And that continued all through high school.
Fuck.
Um,
And you'd already had the reputation as like the bad kid, or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. So I ran away for the first time. I think I was 13, 14 years old, and as soon as I got so I was a responsible runaway. I still went to work, so the it ended up getting me arrested in work for a delinquent child, and I ended up on probation. I think at 14 years old, and I didn't get off till I was 19. In and out of juvenile detention. Most of the charges were just probation violations, curfew, things like that. The most severe was paraphernalia and possession for a weed pipe that had some resin in it, and attempted to carry concealed, because I had a butterfly knife that was in a glove box in front of me. And I was like, well, it wasn't on me, so you can't charge me for carrying concealed. So they attempted.
Through an attempted. That's
Yeah.
dude. Again, going back to the justice system, there's so many situations where people get cast into the role of being the bad person. There's no, they don't pull it apart and figure out why. They didn't go back into your history and figure out why you were doing the things you were doing. It just became that you were the bad guy. Let's fucking push harder and harder and harder until he breaks and stops being an asshole. And
Right.
so many people end up lost in that, man.
Yeah. So it wasn't until just after high school that I started pulling away from all that. I was still 17, but I started to pull away from the drugs and the weed and stuff, and I was away from it a little bit. I got kicked out of the house at 17. Was actually living with my first wife. She was 15. I was living with her and her mom. Oh, well, no, yeah, 14. She was 14. 14, 15. I was 17. She was 3 years younger than me. Um, and was staying with them for a little bit before I finally got my own apartment. Um, and then at some point, like I ended up selling weed again just to pay rent.
Yeah.
I was actually telling this story yesterday that I one time had a cop call me, and he's like, so and so said you just robbed them for $400. I'm like, I told the cop. I was like, yeah, he gave me $400 to go buy him a quarter pound of weed, and I paid my rent and bought groceries instead. The cop's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. I mean, I literally had to pay my rent and put groceries in the fridge, and nothing came of it. I mean, I was completely honest, and he's like, okay, whatever. The guy gave you money to get drugs. That's his own fault for, losing the money.
That's hilarious. So it probably absolutely paid off that you were just fucking autistically honest right there.
Right. Um, but it was, uh, I think between graduating high school in 99 and October of '01, I think I smoked weed like 4 times. And then in October of '01, a month after September 11th, I found out that, she was my girlfriend at the time. She was pregnant with my oldest son. And I'm like, I got to do something. I can't take care of this kid doing what I'm doing now. And, in December of '01 is when I signed on the dotted line.
Damn. Right after how many fucking people signed up after that, man? They had to. I remember thinking. I mean, I'm not sure how old I was, but 25 maybe. Like I was too old, probably. Not necessarily, but I definitely thought about it. So how did your service go? I mean, how was that for you?
It was. I mean, it was interesting. I got the job I wanted. I was, it was a 4421. I was a legal clerk. Um, so I was, and I got staff judge advocate's office. So I was up there with the officers, high-ranking staff NCOs. The two-star would come in my office, and he, I wouldn't have to stand because he was in my office every single day. He liked my coffee better than his sergeants. Um, so that was all good. And then I started to ramp up for what was supposed to be my first deployment, which was Djibouti, Africa. And I don't remember what happened as to why I got pulled off of that. So
That's a shame because everybody loves Djibouti.
yeah, I was supposed to go there in '03. So they pulled me off of that. And then I started ramping up to go to Afghanistan in '04. And I had a junior PFC that just couldn't get himself straight. He failed his room inspection 2 weekends in a row. So we had to take time. Me and another corporal took time away from our families to go show him how to clean his barracks room. 4 hours in his barracks room, showing him how to clean it. And then the next week he fails again. So
Fuck.
they're like, all right, well, you're not going to Afghanistan now. We're going to send him instead to see if he grows up. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. So, I'm 3 years in the Marine Corps, doing nothing but sitting in this office, like not completely nothing. Like I did a lot of shit, but we joined the Marines. Eventually, we want to go do something, not just stay in the same
Right.
place the whole time. So I'm coming up on my last year. My gunny's like, well, you want to go to Japan for a year? I can try and make sure you stay here in Lejeune for your last year, so you're here with your kids, or you can go TAD to Iraq. And I'm like, send me to Iraq. He's like, wait, don't you want to go talk to your wife about it? I'm like, no, man. I'm like, I've already ramped up, a couple times. I'm ready to go do something. I'm like, I don't need her permission to go. So yeah, that's in March of '05. I got TAD to RCT 8, 8th Marines, and headed over to Fallujah. Um, but it's wild because TAD for me was literally, well, I went and checked in with the unit, and then a couple weeks before we were shipping off, and then that was it. I didn't start meeting anybody I deployed with until we were checking our rifles out of the armory.
Mm. What's TAD for non-military?
Temporary. It's temporary.
Temporary active duty, I'm sure.
Yeah, attached to another unit temporarily.
Okay.
Like it wasn't full orders to transfer to the other unit, just temporarily attached to them. So like I didn't even do their full rotation. They were there for a year. I was just there for 7 months. They had somebody coming in at 7 months to replace me.
Okay.
Which if I stayed for the whole time, it would have been past my EAS anyways. But over there, it's a whole different ball game. So first off, it's anxious and scared because I'm going to this war zone not knowing anybody,
Yeah.
nobody.
Where generally you would go with guys that you've trained with, guys that you've been with, guys that you've worked with.
Right.
Yeah.
So and then being a headquarters office job, I wasn't used to the grunt mentality. So first thing when we get in Fallujah, the sea bags are all just dumped in a big giant pile, and I'm trying to find my sea bag, and I think I grabbed somebody's wrong one or something, and I had a corporal put me at attention and chew me out, which was something completely new to me. Uh, Caught me off guard. Um, but yeah, over there it was interesting. So have you seen you've seen the movie Jarhead, right?
It's been a while, but yeah.
So you remember how like he's got the bad guy in his scope, finger on the trigger, waiting for the ROE to say he can pull.
Yeah.
Um, so that was the closest I got to pulling a trigger. It was
Mm.
the exact same thing. I still remember the guy's face. We're out doing what we called the toy op, where we got a whole bunch of donations of toys, school supplies, and candy, and we're out, in Fallujah trying to win over hearts and minds because it's just after the second invasion, um, or the second battle. So we got a car coming up on, on our group, and the XO's like, hey, Schwenk taps me on the shoulder, and he's like, let's, get ready, and yeah, rifles up. My major actually took a picture. I have a picture of this moment where I'm standing there next to the XO, both of our rifles up, aim down, finger off, or finger on the trigger, safety off, and the guy turned just in time. Um,
Mm.
so that was my like kind of experience like that. So I never pulled the trigger over there. However, getting shot at was a different story. Uh, I took because of my problems adjusting, not knowing anybody over there, I was sent over to Ramadi for a couple weeks, um, to, people I'd already trained with and knew.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they're like, hey, we're going to send you over to Ramadi and kind of, help you adjust. Um, and we were over there. I was there when the ammo dump got hit. I want to say like May of '05, and Marine got killed across the way from Camp Ramadi. Like it was big explosion. And we had rounds just zipping, cracking over our head while we were on the roof, just kind of looking to see what's going on. Um, and
Fuck
also
that, dude.
also had an RPG flying by like right outside the door while I was on the phone with my first wife at the time. I was on the tac phone talking to her, and
Holy.
you could just hear this RPG just fucking roar by the door. And I'm like, hey, you just on the phone with me while I survived my first RPG attack. And she's like,
Holy shit.
don't tell me that shit. um,
Let me
so
ask you a question. So, just before you go on, the fact that you had a dude in your sights and you didn't pull the trigger, you didn't weren't allowed to pull the trigger or didn't need to pull the trigger because you go through the training to be a killer. Do you find yourself regretting you didn't get the chance to pull the trigger? Or are you kind of happy you didn't pull the trigger?
it's it's a hard balance. There are times where I feel like I regret it, and there's other times I'm happy I didn't. It really is. Because of my situations, even though I was in a combat zone and was debris and Fallujah raining down on me from mortar attacks. If it wasn't for the big giant berm by the trailers, one of the attacks, I wouldn't be here. Things like that. But because I wasn't a trigger puller, I never rated a car. So it's an
Right.
internal battle for me to be able to say whether I'm a combat veteran or not. Um, so it's sometimes it's like, yeah, I wish I got that chance, and other times it's like, well, I've seen how that's affected friends,
Yeah.
so it might be a good thing, but it's still one of those moments where like it was the absolute calmest, most clear moment in my entire life, to the point where even now, I can still see it clear as day. I can still see his face clear as day.
Damn.
Um,
Which is what all your training's for, right? I mean,
right.
damn. That's crazy. I mean, you have to know that for combat to be successful, there's a lot of working parts that aren't just the trigger pullers.
I know. But it's at being a Pogue MOS, it's that that grunt mentality that I've always kind of fought and argued against, because I've, even as a Pogue, and still not pulling a trigger. I know grunts over that went over and still did less than I did.
Yeah.
I didn't sit behind the wire. I was there, multiple trips between Fallujah and Ramadi, multiple trips around the city of Fallujah, um, things like that. And so I've always kind of fought against that, but it's still an internal struggle, because that's the grunts just beat it into you. Well, you're a Pogue, you're a Pogue, you're a Pogue, and the VA does too. It's not
Yeah.
just the grunts. The VA did it to me too. I fought for years for my PTSD. I'm like, hey, something's wrong here. Well, you just got anxiety, and or I'd be having those conversations and trying to get therapy, or talk to a psychiatrist, and they're like, oh, what was your MOS? Well, I was a 4421 legal service specialist. Oh, well, they didn't really say it, but they're like, you could tell. It's like, oh, well, you didn't do shit. So what's wrong with you?
Damn.
Was
That's got to be tenfold tough, because you're dealing with PTSD can hit you for a lot of different reasons, man. And then you got to deal with the fact that you're getting almost like laughed at or denied for what you're dealing with. Fuck, dude. Have you found some relief from PTSD?
uh, so yes, so life has been a roller coaster since getting out. A few months after getting out, I ended up doing asphalt work just to pay the bills, and that's a summer job. I was dealing with a divorce, and issues with my first wife and things like that. But I did get into undergrad school, so I went and got my bachelor's in business. Didn't do a damn thing for me. Um, so I was still continuing just to do asphalt work. I did asphalt work for 8 seasons, 8 summers after getting out of the Marine Corps. And then in 2013, I went into law school. Well, and during all this time, I'm still smoking weed, doing drugs, drinking, partying, what have you, because I don't know how to deal with anything else.
Right.
I actually had a friend who had a key to my house, and he knew to come into the house very, very quietly and look for my gun, to move my gun before he, tried to wake me up. Um, but it was a roller coaster. And then in 2012, I heard about Team Rubicon. Um, so I actually signed up with them, uh, and was also studying to take my LSAT to try and get into law school. Um, and then, what was it? October, November of 2012, I went with Team Rubicon to New York City to help clean up after Superstorm Sandy. And that was the first time since getting out of the Marines, 6 years later, that I've felt some of that camaraderie again. Um,
Yeah.
it was a well-oiled machine just instantly, like a bunch of veterans just like taking charge of helping people. Um, and that was my first taste, but I got into law school. So I ended up moving away from that and went to law school. Um, while I was in law school, my third year, a few months before I graduated, my daughter was born. And then I married my second wife a month before graduation, and she bought me a half ounce of cocaine for the for the wedding, basically.
That's
The
sweet.
Right. Right. So then my life started to spiral again downhill after law school. I didn't pass the bar. I did get a decent job, but cocaine was just constantly flowing through the house. Um, and then we bought a house and moved away from all those people and all that. So all that kind of like stopped. I was just smoking weed and drinking too much. And 2018, I lost the job I got um, because I was smoking weed for my PTSD because I thought it was helping, and the company was like, well, even though I was hired, when I did it was a temp job to start. I failed the initial drug screen for marijuana. And then 6 months later, they still hired me into the company. And I knew several people in the company that smoked weed, but they put me on a new client that requested a drug screen. So I went and told them immediately. I'm like, hey, can you put me on a different client? I'm going to fail this drug screen. I use it for my PTSD. It wasn't medical in Ohio just yet.
Right.
Um, so they're like, well, go take the test anyways. I'm like, I'm going to fail it. Why do I need to? I'm admitting to you right now, I'm going to fail it. Why do you need me to take the test? Go take the test anyway. So I go take the test and then come back because the testing facility was like 20 minutes away. And then come back, and then they're like, well, we need you to turn in your badge and we're going to suspend you until we get the test results back. And mind you, this job was an hour and 15 minutes away from my house that I was driving every day. So
Fuck.
I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna clean my desk off and take all my personal shit home because I know I'm going to fail, and I don't want to have to drive just to come get a few things off my desk. Um, so uh, a week later, I got a phone call, and they're like, well, we're gonna let you go. I'm like, well, what was the results of the drug test? And he said, and this is where he messed up. He said, we don't have those yet. I'm like, so what are you firing me for then? Well, when you when we told you we were going to suspend you, you got a little loud and you scared somebody. I'm like, so because you triggered a PTSD outburst because I told you I was going to fail this drug test, you made me go take it anyways, and then you suspended me. That's why I'm getting fired. And he's like, yeah. I'm like, cool. So I ended up getting uh, a settlement for for disability discrimination
Fuck yeah.
because
That's fantastic.
right, they triggered
Fuck the man.
they caused it. I'm like, you're gonna fucking pay for this. I told you up front I was gonna feel it, and then you continued to push the issue. Um, so, but my life spiraled then after that. I was a stay-at-home dad. My ex was just a whole nother story I don't even want to get into. Um, and when she decided to leave in September of 2019, I was rock bottom. I was completely isolated from friends and family, living in suicidal thoughts. 15 minutes wouldn't go by without another suicidal thought.
Yeah.
Um, and that was when I decided to, because I didn't have anybody except for this little girl who needed her dad. Um, so I decided to go ahead and do a 72-hour stay at the VA, and that was a bad decision. That didn't help any. It felt like I was thrown in jail, and then thrown around the table with like 10 different doctors who just wanted to push more drugs on me. Um,
Fuck.
and then the drugs they were pushing on me, like they I think they gave me the one time I was given Seroquel, and that sent me, like, I started it on a Friday, and it sent me into a full blown massive panic attack. Like, I literally sat in my chair all weekend, just trying not to kill myself until I could talk to my doctor on Monday, because that's all it was. Like, I was my mind was so gone. It felt like the only way I had out of that was to, just to do it. So I literally
God, that's
just
fucking wild. How?
sat in my chair for, 3 days doing nothing but rocking. I couldn't sleep, couldn't do nothing else, just trying to stay alive until I could
How
talk to my doctor.
irresponsible to prescribe that on a Friday. Oh,
So,
fucking ridiculous, man.
but yeah, so then in the beginning of 2020 is when I started my healing journey. It started with a program called Save a Warrior, uh, which runs here in Ohio and in California. Um, it's like a 4-day program that is literally just dives into it dives into the childhood trauma. It starts there
Okay.
because everything starts there. That's why there's people that come from good homes that can go through, all this shit and be okay because they grew up in a way to learn healthy ways to cope and
Right.
process and shit like that. And or didn't have, some of this childhood trauma that eventually triggers all this shit. Um, so I did this program that's really helped a lot with that. I spent like 6 months doing the Alcoa, adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families, which is a 12-step program that's not necessarily for drug or alcohol recovery, but from that dysfunction. Um, so that was a thing that really helped. And then I also got the SGB shot, the stellate ganglion block.
I've had one of
Uh,
those myself.
yeah. So the first time I didn't recognize the chain right away. It wasn't until I saw something happen that would normally like trigger that anxiety and that tension. Um, and I was able to laugh about it instead of feeling that trigger. And then like 6 months later, I'd noticed, my anxiety tightening up and being almost constant again. So I got a second one. And then that was it. I haven't needed another one since. Um,
Mm.
but I've got stacks of mental health books. Spent a lot of time just reading, trying to figure it out for myself,
Yeah,
doing what I call doing the work. Um,
I do. I've done a lot of the same with my depression and suicidal ideation. It's a
and
slow burn, man, but I feel safer than trusting. I just don't trust doctors and medicines and things like that very much
right, right,
for the same shit that you went through. I haven't been through that, but I fear that. Like I feel like that's the kind of attention a lot of those people give. Here's some fucking meds. Get out of my office.
right. So, yeah, as I was doing that, and some of it's fake it till you make it. You're retraining your brain to think a completely different way.
Yeah.
So you're just constantly telling your brain, like, no, you're thinking this way, not this way anymore. Think this way. Um, and I slowly got off all the medications and was all that. So my mind was starting to get right, but I didn't have any kind of support base. I still I had a few friends, and then went back around some old friends. So still smoking weed and stuff. Um, and then I'd already been following Irreverent Warriors on social media for a year or two, but nothing ever worked out for me to go to a hike. But something in me told me I needed to go to the Gettysburg hike in 2021, which was for the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And I fought through through anxiety and tears driving the whole way to Gettysburg, just telling myself something for some reason you need to be here. And that's changed my life.
Wow.
Absolutely 100%. The support base I got from being around all these other veterans that are healing in various ways is changed everything for me.
Well,
Um,
because I'm assuming they all can understand where you're coming from with so much of this shit.
Right. And it started to help me realize that, fuck the man, fuck the system, fuck conformity. You know, be myself, be vulnerable. I don't have to, you know, act this way or look this way or say these things because,
Right.
society, the image I see of myself based upon societal standards says that's how I need to be. Um, so I started going with it. These short shorts, like the vulnerability from that alone just helps you to allow the vulnerability from everything else. Um, and it's been amazing. And I started running the Cleveland hike the following year. And I've been the coordinator for Cleveland since. This will be our fourth year for the Cleveland hike. Um, and the support I got from this organization when Austin was murdered was phenomenal. Um, I mean, without all that, and all the healing I was already doing on my own, and working with other veterans that started talking to me about these things and noticed the things I was doing. Um, I probably wouldn't have survived the last year and a half.
Wow. That's a
There's no
beautiful
way.
thing.
Yeah.
I think the sense of community for human beings in general is something that a lot of us lack, but especially if you were military, we talk about that all the time, the brotherhood and taking care of one another and so on. And then you come home and all that's gone. You see so many people struggle with that. So it's beautiful that you found that all of you guys found each other and found a way to circumvent that feeling and have each other, man.
Yeah, yeah, and then uh, I don't know if you've heard the news. One of our brothers, Mike Wilkie, passed away last Sunday, but he was one at conference last March after Austin passed away. I'm like, hey, I need somebody to do work with me. I need to hold myself accountable and work on my recovery again because I'm struggling with this grief and I'm struggling with continuing to move forward. And I feel myself slipping. And Mike was the first one. He said, I'm there. Let's do it. Let's start a book club. We'll get on. We'll get on. We're talking about it. We're like, how are we going to do it? Well, we can just do it through, Facebook video chat, and that's what we did. We went through, uh, I think three books together last year. Um, just continuing to work on our mental health and kind of having like this group therapy type thing. And I still do it now. I've got a Thursday night group that meets every other week, just working on doing the work because mental health recovery is the same thing as like drug and alcohol recovery. You can relapse. So if you're not doing the work, you're going to fall back into that dark place you don't want to be in.
Yeah. Well,
So
um, and I think it's one of those things that I've talked about a lot before, where you don't necessarily, and it is similar to a drug addiction in that you're always going to be, if you're someone who's dealt with deep depression, it's always going to be there. How you learn to deal with it and how you learn to keep yourself out of that is super important, and having that support network's a fucking huge part of that. But what I see in you, man, as we're getting up on the hour here, um, what I see in you is a fucking hero beyond your service, as a hero of somebody that, first off, thank you for your vulnerability, because people need to hear this shit. The reason that I started this podcast is for people like you to be able to tell that story so that other people watching can go, man, I'm not alone. Because that was my whole thing, is that I tried to deal with my own. This is my healing, is that I'm trying to take my platform from being a musician for 30 years and say, hey, look, you see me on the stage, you see me up here, and I'm laughing and I'm smiling, but I cry myself home most of these gigs, and I'm not doing well, and it's okay for me to talk about that and tell you that, even though you have your image of me. Here's the truth about me, and I don't want you to feel as alone as I do. And I love seeing how far you've come, man. A lot of people roll over, a lot of people give up, and you've been through a hell of a lot, and you're a fucking chill dude and a great example of how you can get better.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And another thing I do is, I'm a teacher now too, so I'm trying to help some of these kids that I can see the trauma that they're facing at home, and trying to work with them earlier than anybody worked with me. I had a student that was constantly calling himself stupid and ugly, and I finally got him to the point where you can still see his frustrations, but he doesn't say those things about himself anymore. Um, just tell him, hey, it doesn't matter what anybody else says or thinks about you. You How you feel about yourself is the most important, because you'll face that criticism the rest of your life.
And nobody's fucking more evil than your inner voice sometimes.
Right.
Well, at least mine. When you're in a certain headspace, I assume.
Right. Right. So you gotta give some of these kids these positive affirmations so that they're not save them before they go down that down the wrong path.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dude, just looking at my own kids and co-parenting with a mother through divorce, with their mother through divorce. Like, dude, there's no roadmap to raising a kid, and a lot of people suck because their parents sucked. So a lot of kids are missing things and getting taught the wrong things, and self-esteem and self-worth is something, it's crazy. I never really was able to put together why I struggle with it so much, because I grew up, I mean, we were poor and things weren't perfect in my house, but my mom was always loving. My dad was gone. My stepdad was super loving, kind of dry person, but I never understood. I still to this day don't really know why I've had such a struggle with self-esteem and self-worth and self-confidence. It's a mystery, but you doing that for those kids gives them a better shot at not having to deal with that shit their whole lives. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, here we are at the hour. Ty's always here to ask this question at the end. Do you have any saved rounds? Anything we didn't get to that you'd like to?
No, I just let everybody know that you're enough just as you are. You're loved, and you're needed. Stay here with us. You just gotta find your way.
You're living fucking proof, man. Um, any any links you want to drop? Anything you want them people if they want to reach out to you or follow your story or anything like that?
I don't really have anything that I put anything out on, but you can reach me at Cleveland at irreverentwarriors.com. If you need to ask anything, or you know any other information you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your vulnerability. Thanks for coming on. Incredible story, man. You've been through a more than one person's lifetime of trauma, and here you are on the other end doing good shit for the world and good shit for people. That's fucking hero 101 in my opinion.
Thank you, thank you.
Um,
I appreciate you having me, and let me tell my story.
yeah. As it always happens, we get off these things, and I think of 10 things I should have asked, and you might think of shit you want to talk about. So we'll hit you up in a few months or something, maybe get you back on so you could tell this story to Ty.
Okay.
So thanks again, man. I'm glad you're still fucking here, and everybody listening, like, share, subscribe, all that good shit. And I'm glad you are still fucking here as well.
Thank you. You too, brother.